Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome into the Fantasy Roundup, the final Fantasy Roundup. Hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm your host, Spencer the Guru Urquhart, alongside me, Gabe Henderson. So, how you feeling, Gabe? Be our last one of this style of fantasy show. We're not going to quit talking fantasy, but this will be our last current style fantasy roundup.
I don't think we'll ever stop talking fantasy, especially if people offer to pay us to do it.
Yeah, most definitely, man. Most definitely. We'll have plenty more to come. So, this is definitely not the end. This is the end of this style of show. We're gonna be just get the announcement out of the way here for y'all tuning in. We're gonna bring the fantasy roundup to Dattitude starting next week. Dattitude is gonna become a daily show with Jim Derry. So I'm gonna be joining Jim on Tuesdays. Probably have some commentary from Gabe as well, talking all things fantasy football. Now fantasy baseball getting going, man. We got some fantasy baseball to talk about. Are you excited for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm personally, I was a little burned out with fantasy after this year. Decided to take a break with everything else going on in life, so I'm not playing fantasy baseball this year. But I'm still going to be following it closely, and obviously, I'm a baseball fan, so going to be watching that. Really excited for spring training to get started, and college baseball as well.
Right, right. Yeah, got college baseball going on. LSU, of course, doing their thing, looking to repeat. And so, yeah, and at the springtime also comes NFL free agency, which is always fun to talk about. We've got some next team odds up at DraftKings Sportsbook that we're going to go over here. That's going to be the theme of this show. So we're going to be talking a lot about that. Comment y'all's thoughts on where the free agents are going to end up. Saquon's a free agent. Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Mike Evans, a lot of big names could be on the move, as well as some trade candidates in Justin Fields and Stephon Diggs. We're going to discuss where those guys might end up. So let's get into it here. We'll start off with our fantasy headlines. The Bengals have franchise tagged T. Higgins. That's one name that won't be on the move because they said they have no plans to trade him. Joe Burrow's top two weapons should be back in the fold for next season. Buccaneers are working to re-sign Mike Evans, who's set to hit free agency. The Bucs are clearing cap space as we speak. Just cut Shaq Barrett as they look to bring back Evans, Baker Mayfield, and Antoine Winfield. Got three prominent free agents there. Also, I think the linebackers, David and Devin White, are free agents. So the Bucs have a lot of guys to try to re-sign. Evans, though, definitely one of their top priorities. Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs unlikely to receive the franchise tag. Both received the tag last season from the Giants and the Raiders. So this year, the price would go up if they were to do it again, but it's looking like neither team is going to franchise tag their star running backs. Giants GM said he hasn't ruled it out, but it's looking, according to Adam Schefter, unlikely that either will receive the tag. So they could be playing elsewhere in 2024. I'd personally kind of like that for fantasy because the Giants and Raiders, not the best situations, but we'll have more to come on that. And Justin Fields could be traded before free agency. The Bears GM came out and said he'd like to do right by Fields, which I would think we either keep him or trade him here early. Make that decision soon before teams have already made their quarterback plans. So be interesting to see where he goes. We'll have more on him for the next team odds. So let's discuss the running backs here real quick before we get into the odds. Saquon Jacobs, of course, set to hit free agency, likely won't be tagged, as well as several other starting running backs such as Derrick Henry, DeAndre Swift, Devin Singletary, Austin Eckler, or J.K. Dobbins before he got hurt was a starter. They have a lot of Tony Pollard, a lot of names out there that were starting caliber running backs hitting the market. So it kind of raised the question to me: Is this the year running backs get paid? Because there's going to be a lot on the open market. Gabe shaking his head no. So he think these guys are just. I mean, there's a lot on the market, but you think they're just going to have to settle for cheap short-term deals?
I don't think this is a year that we see running backs get paid, as you put. I think we'll see one or two get paid. But I don't think the NFL is suddenly going to change the way that they view the running back position. Owners and coaches and GMs, they all view it as an expendable position. So, we know the history with all the holdouts in the past with Le'Veon Bell and Melvin Gordon and all that kind of stuff. We know those guys have tried to get money for the running back position. I just don't see it changing, although I think a few guys on this list could get paid.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be tough because, like you said, it's a pretty expendable position. Don't see GMs all of a sudden changing their tune. But, yeah, I definitely think that they'll at least get a lot of short-term money. More so that, last year they all got franchise tagged. Right, this year I think they'll have a little more leverage because look at teams like the Ravens. They had basically no reliable running backs down the stretch, and I feel like that really burned them against the Chiefs. And then the Cowboys with Tony Pollard. I mean, he is all right, but they could have done better than just him. And the Eagles, DeAndre Swift, he was all right, but is he really a lead back material? Like, I think some of these teams, especially these contending teams that are like a piece or two away from something big. I mean, like your Texans, Gabe. I mean, Devin Singletary was solid, but just imagine if he plugged Saquon Barkley into that spot.
Oh, trust me, Spencer. I've spent months thinking about that.
Right, yeah, or even Josh Jacobs. I feel like, they both be good, and as we'll see with the odds, the Texans are a team that's in the mix for both of those guys. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's going to be some bidding wars. Another team, the Chargers, with Eckler, free agent, Jim Harbaugh now there, they're going to probably go after a prominent running back, especially with Greg Roman being their new OC over there, who's a guy that made the running game really successful for the Ravens.
Yeah, I can already tell you that Austin Eckler is not going to be the guy in LA. He's not the power runner, just the downfield guy that Greg Roman's going to want.
Right. Yeah, that's why we'll see Henry and Jacobs candidates for the Chargers. But before we'll circle back to running backs before we get back to it. Let's discuss Justin Fields. Next team odds. We'll start off with him. Where will Justin Fields play in 2024? And right now, the betting favorite to land Justin Fields, the Atlanta Falcons at -120, which doesn't surprise me, being that they really need a quarterback.
Yeah, I don't think he'll stay in Chicago. I think that much is known right now, unless they get an absolute bag for the number one pick, which they've already said they want unprecedented returns, and I don't think they'll get that. So I think they're going to end up taking Caleb Williams with that number one pick. And I think they're going to, as you mentioned earlier, do right by Justin Fields. And I think the Atlanta Falcons are the perfect destination for him. He's from Kennesaw. He is a guy that could vastly improve the Falcons. We heard what Raheem Morris said earlier. He's like, if this team had better quarterback play, I wouldn't be standing up here right now as the new head coach. And I think that speaks volumes to his current situation in the quarterback room. And I think if they can bring in Fields for relatively cheap, which is what I think they'll get him at, I think it's definitely a move that makes too much sense for every party.
Right. Yeah, they've got that number 8 overall pick that they could throw in there if it ends up a bidding war for Fields. Because I also think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to go for him. They're at 3-1 there, but I think they're very much in the mix. Right now, they're the favorites to land Russell Wilson. But I'd much rather Justin Fields than Russell Wilson. He's like 10 years younger and has way more upside. He's someone that's just scratching the surface of what he can do. Russell Wilson, someone that is for sure the back 9 of his career, could be washed completely. He did a little better last year, but I feel like Fields, though, is someone that has a lot of untapped potential. So the Bears still in the mix to be his next team there at +150. They could opt to keep him and instead trade that number 1 overall pick. They'd probably get more of a haul for that first overall pick. Well, I know that they would. So if they believe in Fields, they could just keep him. But it sounds like they're pretty tempted to keep that number 1 pick to get Caleb Williams, who has more upside for sure, but maybe more downside, because at least with Fields, he's at least a competent NFL quarterback. Where with Caleb Williams, yeah, he's got potential to be great, but with all his drama, let's just put it nicely, with this, I feel like he's just someone that Yeah, if he's dialed in, he's going to be great, but can we trust him to be dialed in? I don't know. But going to Chicago, that tends to be a spot where quarterbacks go to die. And I feel like Fields has just kind of embraced it, like being the Bears quarterback. So we'll see if he stays. But yeah, I'm with you, Gabe. I think they'd end up trading him to Atlanta because they've got more to offer than Pittsburgh. And so I think they'll end up landing him.
Yeah, and I think it's a much better situation for him. I actually think Fields to Atlanta, and I don't think Fields is a really good prospect for Pittsburgh. Let's put it that way. Then you'll see him regress to what he was a few years ago. Um, I'm going to be honest. As fun as George Pickens is, he's not a number one receiver in the NFL. I don't think. If he is, he's a low end number one, maybe a high end number two. They don't have the weapons needed to succeed with Justin Fields. They won't help him at all in the running game. He's got no receiving targets. I think Atlanta's definitely the destination that's better for him, where he's got, a solid tight end in Kyle Pitts. Say what you will about Kyle Pitts. I think Arthur Smith misused him. I think Pitts can still be a really good tight end. Reliable target. He's got Drake London out there, and then he's got a strong running game that he can lean on as well. So a lot of different opportunities for him, and I think Atlanta's the best landing spot for him.
Agreed, because guess who the new Pittsburgh offensive coordinator is? Arthur Smith.
Yep.
I don't want anything to do with an Arthur Smith offense for fantasy, unless it's the running backs. I like that for Najee and Jalen Warren, but I hate it for Pickens and Deontay Johnson. Arthur Smith, that's where pass catchers go to die. So
there are some. There's a certain brand of football fan out there, Spencer, and I consider myself a part of this elite group. We're called sickos, and a Russell Wilson Arthur Smith combination is something I absolutely want to see.
yeah, I mean, they're betting favorites to land him.
Yeah.
It'll be ugly for sure, but yeah, we'll see. But yeah, as of now, it looks like Wilson and the Steelers Fields to Atlanta, which would be exciting for fantasy with the Zach Robinson, the new young offensive coordinator over there, should help get the most out of Fields.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and then the Raiders a long shot there at plus 750, but I'm thinking they're looking more toward like a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, I'm thinking they can try and move up, or even if we get some trades in the first round where we see skill positions go, or even defensive players, I think the Raiders could end up landing one of the top three quarterbacks, and I think they have the 7th pick.
For sure. So let's get into Saquon Barkley next, y'all. Saquon, these odds have shifted a lot. The Giants were a heavy favorite to retain him. But then a few days ago at DraftKings, they took the odds down. I was like, what's going on here? And then when they put them back up, the Houston Texans now are right there with the New York Giants. Giants, the current favorites there at even money, but the Texans not far behind at plus 150. You think there's hope for this, Gabe? I know you live in Houston. Have the tea leaves been trending in that direction?
Aaron Wilson, a local reporter on the NFL, he's really good with that info. He said there's mutual interest there. The biggest thing about the Houston Texans is they have a need at running back, and they've got an absolute bag to spend. So I said earlier that Justin Fields to Atlanta makes too much sense. Saquon Barkley to Houston makes too much sense. I'm not getting my hopes up as a fan. I'm kind of just cautiously optimistic here, but I think if both sides want it badly enough, I think the money can work, and I think they can absolutely make it happen.
For sure, because if you look at all the talent that the Texans have on the rookie deal, C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, Tank Dell, Nico Collins. I mean, that's like 4 of the best players, all just on these cheap rookie deals. Derek Stingley. I mean, that might be at least that's 5 of the 10 best players on the Texans, all on rookie contracts. So yeah, they definitely have the bag to get one of these prominent free agents, maybe 2. I mean, they're also in the mix for Mike Evans. So Texans could really make some headway this offseason, because if they can get some strong veterans to complement all that young talent, they could challenge to be one of the AFC's, not just a playoff team, one of the AFC's elite.
Yeah, they have some of the most cap money to work with. I think they're 6th in cap. The possibilities are endless. And as you mentioned, those guys are on rookie deals. It's really just kind of re-sign the guys that you want, because they had a lot of guys on prove it deals and, fill in the holes with free agency in the draft.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, because Devin Singletary, Dalton Schultz on the prove it deals might want to. Well, Schultz they'll probably bring back because there's just not really much available at tight end this offseason. But running back, you got all these big names, so Saquon could be somebody. He's also in the mix to go to the Chargers. The Chargers at 4-1. We mentioned them as a running back needy team. And yeah, I think him and Jim Harbaugh, that would be quite the fit because, I mean, we all know what Jim Harbaugh's offenses do with running backs. They usually do pretty well, and Greg Roman the same. I mean, they are going to pound the rock there at the Chargers, despite having Justin Herbert, who should still get his. I'm not completely panicking about Justin Herbert. A lot of people in the fantasy community are saying, Justin Herbert's ruined now. It's the Greg Roman offense. He's no longer a QB1. I'm like, pump the brakes, pump the brakes. I think Greg Roman's not a complete idiot. He knows that he's got a guy like Herbert that he's going to have to pass some, but I definitely think they go add a prominent running back. So the Texans decide to splurge on like Mike Evans instead, then yeah, I could see the Chargers swooping in for Saquon.
Yeah, and let's not lost in all of this, Spencer. We haven't mentioned this: that the cap space in the NFL, the cap limit went up 30 million this offseason, which is huge for some of these teams. I know as a Saints fan, you know how big that is. But for some of these teams who already have money and they're looking to spend a little more, like the Texans, they could make 2 marquee signings.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they could. And the Chargers, I mean, that's why I think there's like Saquon, I think is going to get paid. I really do. He's
I
going to
agree.
be one of the exceptions as far as there will be some running backs that get paid because these teams have more money to spend. And let's be real, if it wasn't for Saquon, the Giants probably would have only won like 2 games last year. I mean, that team is terrible without Saquon. But I think they're blowing it up. I think they're just going to just be really bad next year and they'll probably just, if Dable, like, I don't know if they'll probably just move on from him, even though it's not really his fault. Kind of like the Titans with Mike Vrabel. It was like, it wasn't really Vrabel's fault, but things didn't fall his way. And so we'll see. I mean, that's a long ways off, but I'm just saying I could see the Giants being one of those teams that's just like, screw it. We're bad. We're just going to tank and start over. So I think there's a good chance Saquon's playing elsewhere next year.
Yeah, the one thing I will mention though is if we look at last offseason, look at the overspending that the Giants did to keep Daniel Jones there. Could we see the same with Saquon Barkley? You never know. I think they're going to be very calculated in their next move. As you mentioned, they could blow it up, but if they want to keep Saquon, I think they'll find a way by paying him. So it'll be really interesting to see. This is one of the free agent sagas that I'm looking forward to the most.
Yeah, most definitely. A lot of big skill players on the market. Derrick Henry set to hit the market for the first time in his career. He's getting up in age, but still pretty effective there. Had another 1,000-yard season last year. And the Baltimore Ravens are the betting favorite to land King Henry there. Plus 110. Vegas must know something. They must know that the Ravens are going to be all in with Derrick Henry, as well as the Dallas Cowboys, who are in the mix for Saquon as well, because I think the Cowboys, they want their next Zeke. Like Tony Pollard didn't get it done. So I think they're going to try to take a stab at one of these prominent free agents.
You know what really surprises me here, Spencer? The name that's not on the board that I really thought would be is the Philadelphia Eagles. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned earlier, DeAndre Swift really wasn't working toward the end of the season for them. And Nick Sirianni loves to run the football. They were linked to Derrick Henry last offseason. And even near the trade deadline, there were rumors. I know the Baltimore Ravens, it ended up coming out that they were the one team that was in discussions with Tennessee to bring Derrick Henry in. So I think they're rightfully the betting favorites. But I would be surprised if Derrick Henry went to Dallas or Miami even over Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia is a sneaky player here.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I think they were around like 20-1, maybe. Like they were kind of a long shot. So yeah, if y'all looking to place a long shot wager there, that could be worth a look. The Eagles, because yeah, they could definitely use a bigger back. I mean, all their
Mm-hmm.
backs are small last year. They didn't really have like a true goal line back. So yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. The Chargers make sense there at 11-1.
Yeah.
They're looking for a big back. I could see them being a player if they can't get Saquon. And then you got the Dolphins, Texans, and Titans all at 10-1. I mean, the Texans, if they miss out on the big names, I could see it. Well, really the big name. I mean, Saquon's the big name. And then Jacobs and Henry are kind of like the consolation prizes. Then the Titans, I mean, if Henry wants to remain a Titan for life, he could stay. But to me, that wouldn't really make sense for him or the organization. They're an organization that's rebuilding. I mean, they should just move forward with Tajay Spears and spend that money on things they need more. Offensive line help, secondary help. They could really use help in those areas. So I don't see him going back to the Titans. Yeah, receiver. Yeah, they have too many other needs. And in Miami, I don't see either. I mean, you got Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, unless they decide to move on from Mostert. But I mean, he led the league in touchdowns last year. I don't see them doing that. So yeah, to me, him and the Titans don't really make much sense. So to me, the four teams and maybe fifth if you want to throw in the Eagles, that to me are the most logical for Henry. Would be the Ravens, Cowboys, Texans, and Chargers.
Yeah, to me, the trio at 10-1 just doesn't make sense. Obviously, odds makers are smarter and they know more than I do, but I can't wrap my head around the three at 10-1. Just because with the Titans, the farewell speech that Henry gave when he walked off the field, I just don't see him coming back, and I don't see the Titans really wanting to bring him back. The Dolphins, they're too stacked in the backfield, and honestly, I don't think the Texans are going to splurge on a running back as old as Henry. Especially when D'Amico Ryan saw up close and personal last year how relatively easy it is to stop him. Obviously not physically, but from a scheming standpoint on the ground. I just don't think the Texans would do that. I think they'd be more likely to bring back Singletary. So for all of those reasons, the trio at 10-1 just puzzles me. I think the Eagles should be higher up here.
For sure. Let's move on now to our last running back on the board, Josh Jacobs, who's a pretty heavy favorite to return to the Las Vegas Raiders there, minus 320. Vegas must be pretty sure that that's going to happen, but you never know with this stuff. I mean, if the wind blows one way, I mean, if the Raiders, annoy him in these negotiations in the next week or two, then it's like he might just be like, I'm out of here. I'm testing the market. But for now, it looks like he's a pretty safe bet to return to Vegas.
Yeah, do you remember that primetime game where the Raiders blew out the Chargers?
I remember of it. I don't think I watched it. I think I had it a little bit. I was like, I'll put it on later. And then I was like, well, this is already over. I'm not messing with this game.
So on that primetime game, the broadcast team ran out of stuff to talk about relatively early, and they mentioned a fun little nugget that Antonio Pierce, if he were stuck in an alley and he had to take two players with him, Max Crosby and Josh Jacobs were the two guys that he would take with him. And from then on, I just knew if Pierce was going to be the Raiders' next coach, there's no way Josh Jacobs ends up elsewhere. I think these odds kind of validate that. I think he's going to stay with the Raiders. They might not tag him; they'll give him a bag. I just don't think with Pierce there. I think they're going to go into a meeting with him. They're going to lock the doors and they're going to say, "All right, we're going to find a figure that works for you because our head coach needs you."
That makes sense because Pierce really seemed to value Jacobs. He remember when he took the job, basically took him aside and was like, "Well, what plays work for you?" As opposed to with McDaniels, it was just, so here's the playbook, study it, do your best. So Pierce is like, well, let's work with you to determine what blocking schemes work best for you and stuff. So yeah, I think the fact that he took that much time with Jacobs tells me he really values him as a key piece in that offense. So yeah, I could see, I see him going back. The Chargers, though, I think are going to try to throw a bag at him, being that he's unless they get Saquon. If they get Saquon, well, no one has to worry about that. Same with the Texans. But I think the team out of the Chargers and the Texans that doesn't get Saquon, they're going to try their hardest to get Jacobs away from the Raiders. But I don't think they'll be successful in doing so since Jacobs has the good relationship with Antonio Pierce.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, and I think the fact that they just hired Pierce, I think Pierce is going to tell him, "Hey, I mean, you guys hired me. You got to kind of give me what you want, what I want here, and I want Josh Jacobs to remain in the black and gray."
And the Ravens, they're 11-1, but yeah, like I said, doubt that any of these teams will be able to prevent the Raiders from bringing him back. But, I mean, they got other names on the market. I mean, like DeAndre Swift, Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard. I mean, the Ravens are the favorites to get Derrick Henry, so they're going to get somebody. They're definitely not going to go in the next season with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards as their two starters.
I agree.
Been a problem there for too long. They need a legit – I mean, they haven't really had a legit running back there since Mark Ingram.
Yeah. No, I agree. They do have Dalvin Cook in the building, don't forget.
I think he's just he's going to be a free agent. But
they
could bring him back. They could bring him back. But he would be a backup. He's not a starter anymore.
No, I agree.
All right, well, that's our running back talk. Let's move on to Mike Evans, who's going to be the most prominent receiver to hit the market most likely, with T. Higgins already tagged and Michael Pittman likely to also receive the tag from the Colts. So Mike Evans, minus 175, favorite to return to the Bucs, but the Texans and Chiefs appear to be in the mix. Texans plus 330, Chiefs 5-1.
I think this is a two-horse race. I think it's the Buccaneers and the Texans. I don't really see the Chiefs spending this much money on a receiver. I think let's be honest, Spencer, they just won a Super Bowl with that receiving core that people say is crap. Rashee Rice has been really good. I think they'll re-sign some of the veterans that they have, and they might draft some young guys to try and piece in. I just don't see them spending a lot. I think they've got needs elsewhere that they can address and strengthen their team. I think the Buccaneers are probably where he's going to stay, where he's going to end up next season as well. I just don't see him leaving. He's a loyal guy. But I think the Texans will try and make a run at him. He's from Galveston, so, he's sort of a local guy. Galveston about an hour from Houston, even though it's said to be in the greater Houston area. So Mike Evans, a lot of people have made that connection. I just don't see the Texans going that hard after him. I don't see him spending that much money on a guy who's on the other side of 30.
For sure. Yeah, the Bucs seem to be really making a conscious effort to re-sign him, so that's probably where he'll end up, as evidenced by these odds. If anything, I'd probably rather lay that as opposed to Jacobs, going to be minus 320. It's like you're going to lay so much juice. Where this, you're laying some juice, but I think this is probably, I would probably say it should be more like a 1-2 minus 200. So to me, the minus 175 here is kind of a value, because to me, the only way the Chiefs bring him in is if he's willing to sign a team-friendly short-term deal, which I don't know if he'd be willing to do that. He's a guy that he's still, he's going to get a bag. Like, he's still an elite receiver. So the Chiefs, I don't think, can afford to give him the bag. They could have given that bag to Tyreek Hill and couldn't, so they traded him. So I don't see Evans being able to get a bag from them. The only way he'd go there is if he's ring chasing, which he already got a ring with the Bucs a few years ago, and he seemed to have a good connection with Baker Mayfield. But the other team that could throw a huge bag at him is the Carolina Panthers there at 15-1, but is he I don't think there's any way he goes there. Bryce Young looked like a disaster last year. I know Dave Canales is there now, though, and they seem to have a good relationship, but I don't know as far as this. They'll be able to pay him, but I think the Bucs will also be able to pay him. So to me, if it's close between them, he's going to stay in Tampa.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't see any free agents really wanting to go to Carolina. That's just I think the connection between Evans and their new head coach is the only reason that they're even on this list, because I don't think, like I said, anyone's going to want to go to Carolina. They're a mess.
Yeah, the owner's a disaster over there. So, I don't see that happening. But let's move on now to our next team odds. And the last one will be Stephon Diggs, another trade candidate who's someone that is most likely to stay with Buffalo, and he's under contract for a while, but seems like every offseason he's in the rumor mill because he doesn't seem happy over there. It just seems to be the same sad story. They do well in the season and they get knocked out in the divisional round, and he seems to always be one of the culprits. This year he dropped a huge pass, and him and Josh Allen didn't seem to have as good of a connection in the second half, especially when Joe Brady took over. And I think that's the reason why I think this offseason is the best chance of him getting traded. Because last offseason was more just silly stuff. It was like they were still so elite. There's no way they were going to trade him. But Diggs really wasn't elite in the second half of 2023, and in the playoffs was a letdown. So Texans could be in the mix here, as well as the Chiefs, and then the Cowboys, Bears, and Ravens all in there at 12-1. But moving Diggs would create a lot of dead cap for Buffalo. So more than likely staying. But do you see these trade rumors having legs, Gabe?
I think the only way he leaves is if he forces his way out, which, I don't think he has the cojones to do. I think he's a guy that just likes to stir the pot and try and say, you know what, I dare you to trade me. But I don't think he's going to just come out and flat out say, you need to trade me. I'm not going to play here. I think he's
Yeah.
going to stay in Buffalo. If he goes anywhere, I think the only team on this list that he would end up with is the Dallas Cowboys, because I know this is a move that Jerry Jones would be licking his chops over. I just don't see it happening, though. I think he stays in Buffalo.
Yeah, and then his brother Trayvon's there, the top cornerback. So, yeah, I could see Jerry trying this. Especially if I don't think Brandon Cooks is a free agent, but he's up in age to where they'll either move on from him or Michael Gallup to make room for Diggs if they can. Have Diggs and CeeDee Lamb would be really lethal, but I don't see them being able to do that as far as the cap, because they still got to pay CD, they still got to pay Micah Parsons, so I don't see them being a serious threat. I feel like Jerry's kind of toned it down in recent years too. Maybe he'll make a splash this offseason, but I feel like the past few offseasons he's just been playing it kind of status quo and sticking with Mike McCarthy, and so I know that he's had a tendency to do that in the past, but if anything, maybe the Ravens. I know they're probably going to lose Odell Beckham, so they could use some help at receiver, especially with a veteran receiver. So if they have the cap space, I could maybe see them doing it. With Derrick Henry, if they bring in Derrick Henry, trying to just go all in. They've got all those good defensive players, got Lamar in his prime. It's like this is their window. So to me, out of those 12-1s, they're the one that if I had to place a ticket on one of these, I'd probably do the Ravens.
Yeah, that's fair, but I think we're both in agreement here that he stays in Buffalo.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't lay to -300. I'd say that should be more like -250, because I do think there's a chance they explore trade offers, because let's be real, he wasn't that great of a fit in Joe Brady's system down the stretch. His numbers fell
it'll be
off.
intriguing to see.
So, yeah, for sure. But, yeah, we'll have more on Diggs as the time comes. I don't think his would get settled till after free agency, if I had to guess, if he does get moved. So we might have more on this next month or something. But, yeah, we'll have plenty of free agency talk to come. NFL free agency set to begin officially on March 15th, but the legal tampering period is March 13th. So that's when we'll start getting all the Shefty bombs, rap sheet bombs, as far as all the big names probably signing on that day. Let's move on now to fantasy baseball, y'all. Fantasy baseball top 12 for 2024. For those tuning in, you're listening to Fantasy Roundup here on bet.NOLA.com. Our final show for this format, but we've got a lot of kind of a new beginning in a way, because we'll have our Dattitude show coming up. But yeah, take a look at these top 12. This is for 5x5 rotisserie. So for those wondering, how can you only have 2 starting pitches in the top 12? This isn't points, y'all. I know the points leagues, they tend to favor starting pitchers more. But a traditional 5x5, hitters are still king in the roto formats, I feel like. So at the top of the charts, I got Ronald Acuna. He's coming off a career best year, one of the greatest seasons ever, in my opinion. Freaking for 70 steals, hit like 330, 40 bombs. That's stuff of legend, y'all. I wish I could have had Acuna in fantasy last year, because if you had him, even if the rest of your team wasn't incredible, if you have one player that's that freaking good, that can make a difference for sure. So yeah, he's definitely number one this year. I think he'll do fairly well again. I don't see him repeating that season. I don't think he'll ever repeat that season. But I think 40 homers, 50 steals, 300 average, very realistic again. And he's in one of the best lineups. So probably rack up a bunch of runs and RBIs, as well as a Mookie Betts, another one that's just a 5-tool stud. Doesn't steal quite as many bases as he used to, but is so good in all the other categories that he's still top of the charts guy, as well as Kyle Tucker. No real weaknesses in his game either. Who had a 30-30 season last year, led the league in RBIs. Bobby Witt Jr., Royal stud, just got his contract extension. Going to be a Royal for life, most likely. And he's someone that, even though the team around him's not as good, I mean, he's just so good all around. I mean, he had like 90-something runs in RBIs, hit 30 bombs, stole like 40 bases. So I think he's a top 5 player heading into this year. And then I got Freddie Freeman and Juan Soto. Almost flipped these, but I feel like Freddie Freeman, man, he's just so proven, so good. I mean, he even stole like 20 bases last year. Hit well over, I think, like 330. He was right there with Acuna for the batting title. So, yeah, Freddie Freeman still elite, not declining anytime soon. And Soto going to the Yankees should improve a little bit, but I don't think he's quite. Most lists have him number 2. I'm a little lower on him than the consensus, but I feel like Soto's might be a tad overrated in roto formats. And I got a couple of starters there at Spencer Strider and Garrett Cole. To me, these are the only 2 starters that are worth a first-round pick in roto. They're both on really good teams, could get 20 wins, potentially at least 15. And then the strikeouts both have 250-plus strikeout upside, as well as elite ERAs and whips. And then our last 4 hitters here to conclude the top 12. Jose Ramirez had not quite as strong of a year last year, but still an elite fantasy player. Corbin Carroll, one of the elite 5-tool rising stars. Don't see him slowing down anytime soon. Julio Rodriguez, similar to Carroll, just someone that checks all the boxes in roto leagues. And then Matt Olson, doesn't steal bases, but the best slugger from last year, over 50 bombs. Led the league, I think, the NL and I think the whole MLB in RBIs. Tucker, I think, led the AL, and Olson led all MLB. Also had a lot of runs and pretty solid average, too. So, yeah, Matt Olson, don't sleep on him, even though he doesn't steal bases in roto. So, that's the top 12. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I like that list. I'm in agreement with you on Juan Soto. I think people are a bit overrating him, getting a little excited now that he's in pinstripes. I know it's easier to ignore a bad season when you play out in San Diego, but he wasn't great. You know, I follow a few Padres fans, and they were eager to get rid of him just because they thought he was overrated for the return that he commanded. 2 names that I'm keeping an eye on, though, that aren't on this list, just little bonus picks. I really like Austin Riley. He was a guy who struggled to hit home runs early in the season last year. I think he's really going to get going. Swinging the bat really well toward the end of last year for the Braves. Obviously, that offense is one of the best in baseball. So I think he's going to have a lot of RBIs, a lot of home runs, a lot of hits in general. And then Yordan Alvarez, if he can stay healthy. New Astros manager Joe Espada putting him in the 2-hole to get him more at-bats, and so he can drive in Jose Altuve, who gets on base a lot to lead off. So I think he's definitely a guy that I'm looking at as well. He's missed 30 games each of the last 3 years, but if he can stay on the field, I mean, he's really a guy that can rack up not only the RBIs and the home runs, but just the on-base percentage in general.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I almost put Yordan. He was very close to making the cut for me because I feel like he was kind of hurt some last year, so he didn't put up quite the numbers of Matt Olson. Mm-hmm. But if he can stay healthy, I could see him potentially leading the league in RBIs, maybe home runs too. I could see him hitting 50 and 130 ribs. I think that's realistic.
Yeah, for sure. And then as far as guys who can lead the league in home runs, don't count out a Jorge Soler resurgence. He's now out in San Francisco, and that's a ballpark that's not easy to hit home runs in. But all but 4 of his home runs last year would have gone out in his new home ballpark. I think he's going to have a lot of power, and I think he's going to be the first 30 home run guy that we see for the San Francisco Giants since Barry Bonds.
Man, it's been that long since they had a 30 home run?
It's been that long.
That's incredible. Well, then, yeah, I mean, that's just not a hitter's park, so I doubt he'll lead the league in home runs. But, yeah, I think 30 is a realistic number for him.
For sure.
So as far as pitchers, though, Zach Wheeler, Zach Gallen, a couple names that I think are going to do really well this year. Not quite first round in Roto, but they're fairly close. They're both really good. Pitching the NL still, well, with the DH now, it's not quite as, it's not like it used to be where they got to face the pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not quite as much of that, oh, you'd rather NL pitcher as opposed to AL, but, both still elite arms nonetheless. And then Shohei Ohtani, y'all, don't sleep on Ohtani, even though he's not pitching. Probably wouldn't take him in the first because he doesn't have a position. So you're having to putting him at utility. But I think he's still a strong second rounder because if he had a position, I'd probably put him in the first round because to me, all around as a hitter, he's a first round talent, even if he's not pitching. But not having a position kind of hurts because then you can't really move him anywhere else. A lot of key with daily fantasy baseball lineups is having those guys with position flexibility. So Ohtani, as great as he is, just stuck at utility kind of hurts him. But if he falls in your draft, don't be afraid to take him. I think the elbow will be just fine as far as him as a hitter. That's a pitching injury, so I think he'll put up his usual hitting numbers.
Yeah, and two other guys I forgot to mention that I think are worth flyers. Absolutely, Corey Seager. He's a guy that has that first round potential, and then his teammate Adolis Garcia. Everyone who wasn't familiar with Texas Rangers baseball got to know him last postseason. Made a big name for himself. He had over 100 RBIs last year. And if he can get a more consistent bat going, he's got the power, he's got the consistency. He drives in runs in a Texas Rangers lineup that I don't think people can ignore anymore.
Right. You also got Marcus Semien and the young third baseman Josh Jung, and they've got a lot of talent in that lineup.
Yep, ton.
So, all right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this Finals Fantasy Roundup here. Appreciate my dad there for the kind words. Yeah, hopefully Jim is ready, man, because we bring this fantasy heat, but I'm sure he will be. I know Jim plays multiple fantasy football in fantasy baseball leagues. So, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. And he's let Mason win. That was your former classmate there for Cardinals, projected opening day shortstop.
He's an exciting player. I saw a clip where spring training was well and truly back the other day when he threw 99 across the diamond.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, even if his bat's a little slow to start, I think he'll stick in the lineup because of his glove. I think he's someone that has a lot of potential because if he can hit with that glove, that's what you want in a shortstop.
Hey, if you guys need a pitcher too, he can pitch.
Hey, they emergency pitchers, man. Sometimes that can come in handy.
There you go.
Hell yeah. But that's going to do it for Fantasy Roundup. We're not going anywhere, though. We'll be on Dattitude moving forward. Plan is to keep it on Tuesdays, so more than likely you'll still be seeing me on Tuesdays with Jim Derry. But this is it for this format, y'all. So for the final time on Fantasy Roundup, for Gabe Henderson, this is Spencer the Guru Urquhart signing off. Y'all have a good one. Peace out.